Greetings, YouTube. I found myself laughing hysterically last night, which isn't a bad thing, but it reminded me of the time I laughed the hardest in my entire life. And there's a little bit of backstory on this. We've all had the weird player, the person that ends up in our little covey of friends and acquaintances and ends up at our RPG table, and they end up being the one that has the most unique view of the world. And in my case, it was a guy named Dwayne. I can't give you a lot of Dwayne's last name. I don't even remember what it is. But his name was Dwayne. That was pertinent to the situation because I don't never really liked the name Dwayne. I think it's unpleasant to say. I know some people on the internet hate the word moist. Well, Dwayne kind of hits that spot in my brain. And none of the people in this group can remember how Dwayne got there. Now, it was a group that evolved over time. It was like a 3.5 year Gamma World campaign that was kit bashed between the third edition rules, not D&D third edition, but Gamma World third edition rules, and the after the bomb that grew out of TMNT. I kind of mushed these games together and threw a few things in from other places. So it was a real mutant creation in and of itself. But the group that started that campaign, none of those members were in the campaign when it ended. Over time, everyone came and went. It evolved. Some left permanently. Some came and went. So new people showing up at our game were not unusual. And I can't say table because we didn't actually game at a table. We just gamed in the middle room of my apartment, which really didn't have a name. It was where I kept my refrigerator and bookshelves and tables and a chair. It was a very strange apartment. It had been converted from a one family to a two family. And so the idea that someone would just kind of, join the game was not completely foreign to us. The problem is that nobody remembers how Dwayne got there. He just seemed to have arrived. In retrospect, everybody was like, "Oh, I thought you invited him. I thought you invited him." So it was strange. And he was not. He was a very pale person. I mean, I'm pale. He was fish belly white, and his facial hair was even less impressive than mine. He had this very thin little mustache that almost looked like it came out of central casting, and then it was just going to slide off his face. And his hair looked like it was maybe a toupee, but you couldn't quite tell because it was the right color. It just was weird. And he shook my hand upon meeting him. And it was like shaking hands with a dead fish. And I swear to the gods to you, part of my brain wanted to ask him, "Do you have relatives in Innsmouth?" He was a very strange person, but his attitudes were even worse. He just had this "I'm not entirely human" way of looking at the world. And I'm not being mean because he wasn't neurotypical. I've known lots of people in life that weren't neurotypical. No, this was something else that was going on with Dwayne. And he played a very strange character. What a shock. He played a mutant dog that had a turtle's shell, tentacles, and was yellow. It was, sorry, now I'm covered in cat hair. Thank a cat. Right, all we've wanted. Cat hair everywhere. So, yeah, unusual fellow. But he joined our group, he played in our game, and he kind of insinuated himself into our social circle, because occasionally we would socialize outside the game. We would go to breakfast together. A lot of the times people crash at my house. Dwayne did not crash at my house, thankfully. Crash at my house because they were college students. And then we would go to breakfast on like Sunday, and we would often sometimes go to movies or to like go pick up ice cream or hot pretzels and stuff. So he insinuated himself into this to a certain extent. And he was at a party we were at once. It might have been a holiday party, I can't remember. And one of our members, her name was Terry, uh, had attired herself in party clothing, and looked very good in her clothing. I freely admit this. And something in that clicked inside Dwayne's head, and he became very enamored of Terry. Now, he was not inappropriate to her in any way, but he was utterly fixated on her. At the time in my life, I did not really understand the signs, and I didn't understand how inappropriate it was, just like his very obvious fixation with her was. I was not a feminist at that point in my life, and not really aware of what women lived with from creepy dudes. I was not the best male companion to have in the world as well. I fully admit my culpability and my failure in that regard. So I didn't notice his fixation. So move forward a bit, and Dwayne eventually kind of slid out of the group. But he sent a letter to Terry. And in the letter, it was a formal piece written in a 19th century style. Again, how old was Dwayne? Where was he from? Did he really have friends in Innsmouth? And in it, he literally proposed the concept of courting her. He used that language, except it was more eloquent, more awkward. Just imagine, I wish I'd saved it. Imagine the most awkward, most bizarre twist on Jane Austen you can imagine. And Terry was disturbed by this fact, and she gave the letter to one of my fellow gamers at one session. His name was Bill. And Bill read it, and he got to a certain point in the letter, and he started to laugh. And then he laughed at the point where he couldn't talk, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't do anything. He's lying on the ground, gasping for oxygen. So I eventually get the letter out of his hand, and I start reading it. And I get to the same point in the letter that Bill got to, where the purple prose got so deep it would have embarrassed Prince. And I start to laugh. And Bill and I are lying on the floor of the room, gasping for breath, desperately in danger of like passing out because we can't get oxygen into our bodies. We are laughing that hard. And it was the hardest I ever laughed. It was the creepiest letter I ever read, written by the strangest gamer I ever met in my entire life. And that was Dwayne. So let's talk about the weirdest one. The one that came out of the woodwork, or in the case of Dwayne, he may have walked out of the North Atlantic Ocean. So who's the weirdest one you ever had in your game? Who's the one that left a memory in your mind that has never left, but just maybe you wish would?